My name's Kris and I'm part of the team at CoLiving Canada. I'm here with my colleague, Duncan. We're just talking a little bit about co-housing and co-living and about aging successfully, really living successfully. And Duncan actually corrected me about something a moment ago during the first video that we did. And I think that's probably a really great place to start because we all have I guess perceptions or stories that are running in our minds, and we really need to start telling better stories. To do that, we need to understand what the challenges are, but we also need to know that there's other ways than the norm that's been told to us or that we're reading about in the paper, and that we actually have control about steering the course of our own lives and the lives of the people that we find are important in the communities that we live in. So Duncan, what was the correction that you made a second ago when we were talking?
Well, you were talking about different age groups that could be interested in co-housing, co-living, and you mentioned 70 as a locked-in. That's getting into the locked-in period, with the implication that maybe that's getting a little too late to look at that scenario. And I took exception to that and said that, I play slow pitch myself, ball. And particularly if you're playing infield and slow pitch, it's as busy as fast pitch or anything you'll come across. But basically what I was saying, as we speak, there's people in their 70s and 80s and even in their 90s that still play a pretty darn good game, and they can put younger people to shame in terms of what they're able to do. So yeah, it was basically taking a step back and how old is old is the question, and it's changed pretty dramatically over the last few decades in terms of how old is old on that end of it. So that was
well, it's true. Even being in my early 40s, I find it interesting how many people you run into that are really young of mind, and then others that are like, I'm already and I'm aiming for retirement, which is still 20 or 30 or 40 years away, or maybe never coming. And are living to the future, but not living right now. Yeah.
And I guess the other thing too is, like, I have friends that over the last year have single family residence, a big place and so on, and wanting to find something that's on a single floor, something that's easier to navigate, whether you're in your 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever, you just want accommodation that's going to be appropriate. And there's very, very little that currently is available. And so being able to find housing that works, and housing that's, it's very interesting because I have a number of friends that spend the winter down in Phoenix or California and different places, and a lot of them play ball, but a lot of them are in communities, like they're in the communities where people have like trailer courts and that sort of thing. And I had a friend come back last year, and he said, I made more friends in 3 months than I have in the last 10 years in my neighborhood, because we can live, and never even know the person next door. We may know them, but maybe not know their name or any detail. But it was sort of like, how do I replicate that, back, in my community? And so he has now moved into a community where there is, the support, and there's a common area where people can meet and have games and that sort of thing. But that whole issue of community, it's like you don't realize it so much, that you're missing it until you have it, and you're reminded of it, because we're you know, that's the way we've organized ourselves to live, particularly in the suburbs and so on. You know, it's pretty.
What I found interesting is that, yeah, people are, I think, increasingly aware around, you know, commute times and how that impacts their quality of life. And a lot of people have made conscious decisions to maybe not commute a half an hour or an hour each way, recognizing that that's time that's lost. But there's other aspects of our life where we spend a whole lot of time driving or trying to get places that's time that's lost, and that the people, the things, you know, your passions, it's important to be close by. And if you're also, you know, interested in having less of an impact, I had this conversation with somebody yesterday in Ottawa. They asked me, Kris, do you think that you can actually have a bigger impact in reducing your environmental impact by building a net zero home or by living close to transport? And the answer is being close to transport, or being close to all the things that you can walk to or bike to. Just makes a bigger deal. And if you have a group of you living within proximity to each other, then you can have a really significant impact on the environment in a good way, but also on your quality of life and on your economics. You know, in a co-housing situation or co-living situation, the initial cost may be very similar to buying a typical home or a typical housing situation, but the operational costs, because of good design, can be significantly lower, whether it's electricity or water, heating costs, all that sort of stuff. As well as, this is something I think you wanted to touch on, is the care piece. So you want to talk about that a little bit and the realities?
Yeah, well, there's so many dimensions to it. You know, the previous Surgeon General, I believe it was the U.S., talking about loneliness as being the #1 health issue in the U.S. I'm sure it's similar in Canada. And it was sort of like over 40% of the population identify loneliness as their #1 issue. And loneliness is not just a matter of feeling lonely. It's a matter of it has a huge impact on our mental health, our emotional health, and our physical health. He said in terms of longevity, loneliness had a bigger impact on longevity than smoking 15 cigarettes a day, which is absolutely huge shock to a lot of people. But you know, it's a huge,
don't start smoking, Duncan.
So it's a huge thing. So so the other piece in terms of care, you know, and we're going to share on the website a video that a lady did who's living in a co-housing community, I believe it may be in New Mexico, I forget, but she's a medical doctor. And she talked about she moved into the community and she didn't really appreciate all the benefits of living in community until she got sick. And when she got ill, you know, and she was still working age and so on, but when she got sick, there was all kinds of people, you know, bringing her food and dropping in and just doing all kinds of things that was supportive. Things that you would normally, you know, for those of you who've come from a small community, which I did a long time ago, people just do that when they know that somebody has a need. They're there to help, you know, that people have your back. And that is so huge, you know. So, and as we age, our health requirements change. And so to be able to be in a community which is able to be responsive to that is so important on every level. And you know, I was mentioning to you recently about, you know, an article that I was just reading that in British Columbia in seniors care facilities, the 48% of the people in those facilities are either on antidepressants or antipsychotic drugs, almost half, which is just, you know, incredible. And the advocate who was writing the piece said that the actual number of people diagnosed was about a quarter of that seniors population, but they were administering it to almost half. And nobody likes what that has to say about our quality of life and where we're at and where we're headed. And we just need a lot better stories going forward in terms of what are our options, where are we headed. We just need a lot better stories, and so that's why we have CoLiving Canada to help generate much better future scenarios as we live. And as you so rightly point out, this is not just a seniors thing. It covers all age groups. But I'll tell you, in terms of the senior population, it's where the major pinch is being felt, and that's not in small part because of two things. One is health, and one is finance. It's like the financial piece is a huge piece, and like you so rightly pointed out, living better together, you can do that. That is so much better for the mental health, emotional health, physical health, financial health, right across the board on that side of it. So if you look at all of these issues, we're looking forward to a lot of the good news stories and good news scenarios that are out there, and we'll be talking more about those in some of our future sessions as well. But we'll be posting on the video how you can get in touch with CoLiving Canada and find out what's happening in terms of workshops and presentations, and what the opportunities are for you locally in your own community. And we're looking at doing this right across the country as well. So I don't know, is there anything, Kris, that you wanted to add before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of close the circle with your first point, which is, when's the best time to start digging into this stuff? It's right now, or maybe it was 10 years ago or 5 years ago or whatever, and right now. So if you haven't done it already, you got to start planning, just like, doing financial planning and investments. You need to start investing in your future. And a lot of folks, unfortunately, wait until they have that significant event where they fall and hurt themselves, or somebody passes away, and then suddenly their life is thrown into disarray, and they only know about the common options, or the options that they perceive as normal. And the idea here is that there's actually better options, that they're proven that they work, but you need to do the investment up front. You need to take the time to really understand, get involved, and help shape your future. And also learn the tools, because most of us haven't been growing up in a community, or maybe we did, and then we've been missing it and feeling lonely. And I say that for my generation, even the younger generation that are in their 30s, or the millennials in their 20s. They're trying to find a sense of community, and to not just define themselves by their job, and trying to also figure out how do we financially live and sustain ourselves, especially in Toronto, where I am right now. The cost of property is just through the roof, and making a living, being by people that you want to be around, and having the right infrastructure to live well. You can do it, and it's even easier if you spend the time to work with others to come up with better solutions. So, as you said, CoLiving Canada, that's our intent, is to help provide some of those tools and resources.
It's interesting when you mentioned about all age groups. One of the studies in the loneliness was that one of the loneliest groups were men in their 40s. And they said, well, how could that be? That's like men in their 40s, particularly your family and that sort of thing. I mean, you're so busy. Well, you can be so busy and have people all around you and still be very lonely. So it's not just a matter of contact. It's a matter of quality of contact and what's in those relationships. And the other piece of it is, in terms of putting things off, it is so easy to put things off, particularly when it comes to our housing and so on, because for those of us that have moved, several times during our lifetime, we know it's a huge job. Like it's a lot of work moving, and particularly downsizing is, that's a huge undertaking. But the sooner you do that, the easier it is, because, and conversely, the other way as well. But it's an easy thing to put off, but it's not a good thing to put off. It's the earlier the better. Thank you.
Thank you, Duncan. Look forward to chatting more later.
Okay. Thanks, Kris. Bye-bye.